Good evening and welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your night to join us for this hearing tonight. This is a public hearing for the Eagle Groundwater Discharge Permit application submitted by Timber Shores Family RV Camping and Beach Resort in Leelanau Township. My name is Ryan Blazek. I'm with Eagle's Environmental Support Division. I'm just going to be moderating, and I'm also the hearings officer for tonight's hearing. Before we get started, just want to go through what the schedule is. So you can see the agenda in front of you here. We're going to go through an introduction, and the big thing to keep in mind is that there's kind of two parts to this hearing tonight. We're going to start off with an informational session, and we're going to have Eagle staff who are going to describe the application project, followed by a question and answer session, and that should take us no later than around 6:45 or until we get through all the questions. Then we're going to go into the official hearing portion. That's where we have an opportunity to make a comment for the record on this application. We're also going to cover a couple other things like the ways to submit an official comment outside of this hearing, and then who to contact for further questions. In case you haven't joined us for one of these hearings before, a couple things about the Zoom hearings is that all lines are going to be muted during the hearing, so you'll be able to hear us, but we won't hear you unless you need to ask a question during the question and answer session or to make your statement, and we're going to go through how to do that later on. But you can submit a question at any time using the Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar. We'll be answering those questions during the Q&A session specifically. And we also are recording this hearing. So this hearing is being recorded and it'll be on our YouTube channel in a few days. All right. Finally, we're going to kick things off by introducing our Eagle staff who are here with us. As I mentioned, I'm the hearings officer, Ryan Blazek, Water Resources Outreach Specialist. And we also have Chris Alexander, who is a permit section supervisor. We have Christine Rendon, who is a groundwater permits unit supervisor. We have Alyssa Yanachko, who is an engineer permit writer with the groundwater permits unit. We have Angela Strong, a geologist with the groundwater permits unit. And then we have Claire Hanley, who's compliance staff with the Cadillac District Office. And at this point, we're going to move into the informational session. And Alyssa, you're more than welcome to share your screen and kick things off for us. Perfect. Looks good.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm Alyssa Yanachko, as Ryan mentioned. I'm a permit writer with Groundwater Permits Unit. And so I'm going to be going over a little bit about the proposed permit for Timber Shores. And before I get into that, I always like to start off these presentations with talking a little bit about how the Groundwater Permits Unit fits into sort of the governmental agencies. So we're part of the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE for short. EGLE's job is to protect Michigan's environment and public health by managing air, water, land, and energy resources. And so within EGLE, we're part of Water Resources Division. Water Resources Division is tasked with ensuring Michigan's waters are safe and clean for what we call protected uses, which are things like drinking, recreation, fishing, generally a healthy aquatic ecosystem. The Water Resources Division has a variety of programs, including things like wetlands and floodplains regulations, critical dunes protections, and permit issuance, which we fit into. So we're part of permit section. Permit section issues all wastewater discharge permits for both surface and groundwaters for the state of Michigan. You may have heard of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, who issues surface water permits under the Federal Clean Water Act and state law. The Groundwater Permits Unit is a little bit different. We issue permits only under state law. There is no federal regulations that we fall under. And speaking of the law, we issue permits under the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act, or NREPA. In particular, it's Part 31 Water Resources Protection, which regulates all wastewater discharges in the state of Michigan. Under Part 31, there are a variety of rules that have been promulgated. In particular, we operate under the Part 22 rules, groundwater quality, which set out standards for groundwater discharge permits. So we're going to go over, we issue groundwater discharge permits only. We like to remind people that, and it states in our permits, that a groundwater discharge permit does not eliminate the need to obtain other permits for any entity that receives that discharge permit. It's the groundwater discharge permit is just one piece of a big puzzle of permits that may be required for a site. And so we only administer the Part 22 rules, which groundwater permits are issued under. We issue a variety of discharge permits for a variety of wastewater types and different discharge methods. We have some pictures up there as examples, slow rate spray irrigation, things like overland flow, and in this case, rapid infiltration basins. When we look at these different discharge methods, we look at the wastewater according to site-specific characteristics like soil permeability or wastewater characterizations. So when you're looking at groundwater permits, this is the best way to sum it up. When someone is proposing to discharge to the ground, they need a groundwater discharge permit from the state. When we review applications for groundwater discharge permits, we look at them and include effluent limitations, monitoring requirements, and any other conditions we've deemed necessary to control potential discharges of pollutants to the groundwater. And then after a permit is potentially issued, they're enforced through regular submittal of reporting and regular compliance inspections. So when we do that review, we talked about there's a variety of staff that take a look at those applications. We have soil scientists, geologists and hydrogeologists, toxicologists, aquatic biologists, environmental engineers, and they all do a variety of tasks to ensure that groundwater discharge is protective. So groundwater discharges are a little bit different than surface water. You know, surface water, people can visually see. The groundwater, we can't. So we like to go over a little bit that what's discharged on the ground can and will impact surface water, and as well as, you know, is responsible for protecting drinking water, as it's the source of, the groundwater is the source of drinking water for a variety of people throughout the state. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about groundwater monitoring wells. We've included a nice picture in here for you to see an idea of some groundwater permits require the installation of a monitoring well network. In this case, this permit has that are around the discharge location to assure adequate nutrient uptake is happening within the soil and to measure potential impacts of a wastewater discharge to the ground. Monitoring wells must be installed below the water table and into any aquifer that the wastewater discharge can potentially impact. So this is an example of a monitoring well construction to determine the geology around the well and ultimately be able to determine groundwater flow and potential impacts to groundwater. So getting into some specifics about the site, here is a brief site map. Timber Shores is proposing to discharge a maximum of 38,688 gallons per day of treated sanitary sewage to 2 rapid infiltration basins located on site. They're proposing a what's called a moving bed biofilm reactor prior to discharge to these rapid infiltration basins. So a moving bed biofilm reactor, MBBR, uses biological treatment to decrease concentrations of organic parameters that we would typically be concerned in sanitary sewage, such as nitrogen or phosphorus. Here is a picture of the current proposed effluent limits for the discharge. These limits are established based on the Part 22 rules. And because the discharge is to rapid infiltration basins, which are a direct conduit to groundwater. These are the most restrictive of our Part 22 limits. And we'll talk briefly about groundwater monitoring. Again, our Part 22 rules lay out requirements for groundwater monitoring. It also sets out limitations set in the Part 22 rules, and also sets out requirements for the monitoring wells, such as how many there has to be, where they should be located, and how they should be installed. And all these things are done to be protective of groundwater quality, and in particular, drinking water. And so here's a picture of the proposed groundwater limits for those down gradient monitoring wells. So again, those are set to be protective of groundwater quality down gradient of the discharge. So once the discharge goes into the ground, it's being protective of where that would be potentially moving. And then we also briefly wanted to touch on, when any permit is issued, permits can only be effective for a maximum of 5 years. So this is the same for every permit we issue. When a permit is up for reissuance, we reevaluate each permit. We look at digital monitoring reports, sampling that they've taken, violations that they may have accrued, as well as complete new technical reviews in case anything has changed at the facility. And we make determinations during those reissuances. And then I'm just going to touch briefly on how you can submit comments. Ryan Blazek will also talk a little bit about some of the other options, but we've heard that there's been some trouble with My Enviro, so I just wanted to make it as clear as possible. On My Enviro, on the homepage, there's this nice button that says Public Notice Search. You're going to go ahead and click on that, and then it'll bring you to a page where you have a variety of search options. I find it the easiest. You can search it by the site name. So if you just type in timber even, it comes up here, and you're going to want to click on the view/submit comment button. And then you'll be brought to this page where it has details. There's a document tab. You can look at, the draft permit, the application that was submitted, and any information that goes with that. And you can also go ahead and add a comment there. And so it'll ask you things for your name, your email. These are the only 2 things that are required in the comment. And it also has a drop box if you want to drop, a Word document or PDF attachment. So that's it from me for the presentation. I'm going to hand it back over to Ryan and see if there are any questions that we can answer.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Alyssa. Yep, we're going to move into the question and answer kind of session tonight. So I'll explain how we're going to do that, but I'm going to take control of the screen again and share my screen. All right, so I should be back in presentation mode. All right, it'd be great if all our panelists can turn their cameras on for our Q&A session. We're going to have the session. You have a couple options for asking a question. You can submit your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So just type the Q&A box, type your question in, send it to us. Or if you'd like to ask your question verbally, you can click the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. So just click that hand icon. That'll raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you in turn. If you're on the phone, you can type #2 on your phone, and what that will do is it will raise your hand in Zoom, and we will call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. And only other thing I want you to keep in mind is that this is the question and answer session. So this is for any questions that you may have. If you have a statement that you would like to make, just hold on to that. That's going to be the next part of the hearing tonight, is making those statements. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. All right. So first question, this is kind of long. I'll try to get as close to. The Michigan Public Health Act requires government operated sewer connected when available. Municipal sewer connection is also required when seeking with the campground permit. NLTUA welcomes developers to request and pay for a municipal connection. What guidance has the Michigan Attorney General given Eagle regarding policy on sewer connection and this particular GDP groundwater permit application? This is a long one. It sounds like it's getting to connecting to a sewer when it's available and the requirements for a sewer. I don't know, Alyssa, any thoughts on this, or anyone on your panel who might be able to comment on this question?
Alyssa, I can respond for this. So we have, as an agency, we prefer connections to municipal systems when they're available. The department cannot make a municipality accept a connection. It's my understanding in this situation that there is not a municipal system close by. So the rest of the question, as I understand, has the Michigan Attorney General given Eagle any advice regarding this particular application? No, we did not seek advice from the Attorney General regarding this permit application.
All right, thank you, Christine. All right, another question. You handle, and it sounds like X number of permit related requests a year. How many do you reject, or does Eagle reject? Or it sounds like this is kind of a permit processing application question. We might not be able to verbally, I guess, identify that on the spot, but maybe we could talk a little bit about the permitting process. And I don't know, any thoughts on addressing this one?
Sure. There are, Ryan, I'm going to answer the question from the wastewater side of things. I'm not able to speak to the resource permit program. Those permit decisions, a lot of them come from our wetlands and inland lakes and streams side of our program. So this response is in regard to wastewater discharge permits. There are pretty few permit decisions that are denied. If an applicant meets the requirements of the law requires us to issue a permit. There are a lot of times where an applicant will have to go back and make some changes in order to obtain a permit. But to answer the question, there are a small amount of them that are rejected.
All right, thanks, Christine. Looks like we have a couple raised hands, so I think we're going to go to some raised hands. First one is Jane Robinson. We're going to unmute you. Then you'll have an opportunity to mute yourself and ask your question of this panel. So it looks like you're unmuted.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Sure. Okay. I'm a microbiologist and have worked in this area for a long time. I noticed you didn't have any monitoring for bacterial or viral pathogens that would be released into the lake and surrounding groundwater. So what kind of monitoring do you do? And secondly, it seems like 38,000 gallons is kind of low considering the average person uses 100 gallons per day. 100 and yeah. And there's 355 sites. So the volume, but also the monitoring for bacterial and viral pathogens.
All right, any thoughts, Alyssa?
Yeah, I'll start with the flow volume. We do look at flow volumes. The determination was made off of 75 gallons per site. That is in line with what Campgrounds Unit requires of facilities. They do, in the basis of this design that was in the application, they do include a variety of different factors calculated in there, including, you know, perk model and staff cabins and stuff like that. We do not tell them how they have to calculate flows. We do review them and, you know, make sure that they include the data to support that decision. And what they've submitted is relatively in line with what the Campgrounds Unit would calculate. In terms of monitoring for things like bacteria like E. coli, the Part 22 rules does not require that. And so we issue our permits in accordance with the Part 22 rules. So I guess, Christine, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, since this is a discharge to the ground, we do know that there is a microbial action that happens in the soil, and there should not be E. coli ultimately making its way down into there, as long as there's adequate isolation distance between the discharge and groundwater. As for viruses, I can't speak to that.
So I'm new to, well, I grew up here, but did most of my work in Ohio. And so are you saying that there are no regulations about E. coli or other, pathogens being released into groundwater, or monitoring for that?
That is
There's
correct.
no-
We do have minimum isolation distances that these discharge locations have to be from drinking water supply wells. So in the interest of making sure that we are adequate distance away from there.
Right.
Mhm.
We're going to have to move on to another question because we have several in here to address.
Thank
Jason.
you.
But thank you. Thanks for your question. All right, we're going to go to another raised hand. Paul Walter, we're going to unmute you on our end, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question to the panel.
Very good, thank you. Do you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. I have two quick questions. Earlier, in response to another question, the answer was given that our understanding is that there is not a municipal system, quote, nearby. I'm interested in the definition of nearby and in terms of connecting to a municipal waste system. And then I have a second question.
All right, thanks, Paul. Any thoughts on that? On the distance to what, if it's available, or any additional information on that aspect of it? Any thoughts?
The law is pretty clear on requiring people to connect to available systems, but you use the term nearby. So I'm interested in what your definition of nearby is.
Right. So, oh, Chris, did you want to
No,
take?
I was going to ask one of you who are familiar with the application, if you have specifics.
I would have to default back to Alyssa on that for how far the distance is, but typically, Alyssa, can you answer that? How far is the connection, the pipeline?
Yeah, I don't know the exact distance off the top of my head. I do remember that their consultant did calculate it to be about 10,500 feet of force main to put into the closest pump station.
Okay. And we consider, so we're taking the information from the applicant as to whether or not they're actually quote unquote nearby. If I understand the answer correctly.
Yes, we have to go off of the information that's provided in
Right.
the application.
Okay. My other question is this. In an earlier table that you presented, you said that the maximum rate would be approximately 38,688 gallons per day, which if you calculate that out over a year is over 14 million gallons. But a further line in the table stipulated an annual maximum of 7.1 million gallons. So can you clarify how that's managed and controlled?
Yep. So the maximum discharge is a daily discharge, which and the annual could be based on seasonality. So in this case, it probably is because it's a seasonal discharge of a campground. So our soil scientist looks at that receiving discharge, which in this case is the infiltration basin, and they'll look at what the facility is proposing as a maximum daily discharge to ensure that infiltration basin can accept that volume. And in this case, that was calculated. So they can discharge, say, during the summer, they could discharge 38,000 gallons per day, but they can't do that every day of the year. It would go over their annual. So the annual volume is taking into account that it's a seasonal discharge.
So it's the annual volume that controls.
I would say it is both. So they can't go over that certain volume on a daily basis, and then they can't go over that annual volume based on their total annual discharge. So those are both requirements for the facility.
So hypothetically, if they got through 3 months out of 6 months of summer at the maximum daily discharge, they would find themselves at the annual limit and no longer be able to discharge for the remainder of the summer months. Is that a reasonable assessment?
If they were to discharge, it would be a violation of their permit.
Which then does what exactly?
So I can leave it over to Claire to talk about generally what happens when there's a violation of a permit. I guess, Claire, I'll just pass it over to you instead of trying to fumble my way through that.
Just
Yeah, no
interested in
problem.
what would take place if there were a substantial overage of discharge into the local wetlands. Is this like a fine? Do we just pay a fee to destroy the environment, or what happens?
Yeah, so they have, right now as it's proposed, they would be required to submit monthly discharge monitoring reports, which would have flow limits on it. So if they exceeded a daily limit, that would generate a violation. If they exceeded the annual limit, that would generate a violation for each day that they would be in excess of that number. If they get to a point, we have a process of addressing violations informally and formally. So typically we start out at our lower level, or depending on the severity of the violations, we can start out at a higher level. But it typically begins with letters that we ask the facility to come back into compliance. We set up corrective action plans. If we don't get the response that we ask for, we continue to escalate it. Eventually, it can get to the point where we would refer it to formal enforcement, at what point that's where penalties and fines can be implemented under like an administrative consent order or some sort of legal agreement between the facility and the state.
Okay, thank you. So essentially, there would be really no restriction until a substantially later point in the proceedings for environmental damage already done. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
I did want to throw it in there. I didn't want to misspeak without finding it. Under rule our section 2205 of the Part 22 rules, we do look at discharges within 200 feet of an available public sewer when we're looking at potential hookups under the Part 22 rules. So I guess I would just direct you to that, and I would say our definition of close by would likely be 200 feet.
All right, yeah, thanks for looking that up, Alyssa, and for that question. We're going to move to some of the questions typed in the Q&A box. So one question here: what happens if the permit requester goes bankrupt and cannot maintain nor is able to have financial means to address any issues with a discharge that should not have occurred? Do you take potential financial viability into account when considering a permit?
So I guess that's a two-part question. I guess in terms of what we're reviewing when we review an application for a groundwater discharge permit, I would say no, that the monetary value of it does not come into play. We look at the data that's submitted to us and the information. I guess in terms of if they could not maintain the system, that would fall on Claire through the regular site inspections to make those determinations, as well as, you know, the information they're submitting. If they can't maintain the system, they can't maintain the permit limits, they're then in violation of the permit, which I guess Claire did already kind of talk about what happens when they're in violation. I don't know if, Claire, you really need to go over that again. So hopefully that kind of gets at the the meat of the question.
Okay, thanks, Alyssa. All right. All right, so next question is just whether Eagle has visited the site of the location.
So I'm not aware if anyone has. I do not think so. We don't typically do site inspections prior to the issuance of a permit. Sometimes our technical staff will go on site if there's specific site-specific sampling done or things like that. But that's not typical prior to the issuance of the permit.
Thank you. And the question is, has the permit been issued? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the process and where we're at in it as far as the permit and the review and application and so forth.
Sure, I can grab that one. So right now we are in draft form of the permit and it was placed on public notice. I believe we're actually on our second public notice on this one to allow for additional time to gather comments due to the comments that we received that it was hard to actually make comments within the last time period and to accommodate this public hearing. So right now we're at draft form. We are taking all of the comments. We are reviewing them. Again, you know, a lot of the comments seem to be focused on the connection to the municipal sewer system. We will be in contact with the facility and the consultants and going through that through the feasibility study and making sure that we look into that to see if it is available and see what kind of communication was brought on that. So as of right now, this is just a draft permit. It is not issued. And we will be taking into consideration any additional comments and any changes as necessary brought forth from these comments. And then after this public comment period, we would make any changes and then we would be issuing the permit at that point if necessary, if that's the decision.
All right, thanks, Christine. That's very helpful. There's a couple questions / comments related to checking the applicant's numbers in the application to make sure they're correct. And if they lied on the applications, how can we trust them to be compliant? I don't know, can you speak at all to what consequences there may be, or if there are incorrect numbers on the application or what your review involves? Seems like that's some questions on that.
Yeah, so I can start this. You know, we take these applications and they are certifying to us that this information that has been submitted to the department is true and accurate. And based on that, we set our limitations and standards for that specific permit. If we find out that over time, if anything was lied or misconstrued on an application on purpose, I believe the department has the capability of taking further action based on the way that the law is written. I don't know if Chris, if you have anything further to add on that.
No, you captured it well. They certify that the information is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. Unfortunately, the law doesn't have a section about truthfulness. We assume people will comply, and when they don't comply, we have a graduated enforcement process to address, you know, non-compliance and permits.
All right, thank you. Who will monitor the daily discharge each day and throughout the year? I'm assuming once the permit is, if the permit is issued and it gets to that point.
Yeah, I can take this one, Alyssa. If a permit's issued, I would be the compliance staff for this facility. So I would receive monthly monitoring data, which is reviewed. And then we also verify the data that's submitted when we do site inspections. So there's a requirement for a frequency that we need to be out at a facility, and we compare it to bench sheets and lab reports at that time.
All right, thank you. Here's another one I wanted to mention that should you approve the permit, doesn't the township government still have the right to deny application based on its own criteria, things that Eagle does not consider? I guess this is related to the township and.
Yep. So the short answer is yes. the groundwater discharge permit is, if we were to issue a groundwater discharge permit, it's an authorization through us. It doesn't eliminate the need to get any other permits or approvals through any other legal entity, zoning, the campgrounds unit, anything like that. So if some townships have additional wastewater criteria, and that is up to that legal entity, the groundwater permit is separate.
Okay, thanks, Alyssa. The next one is kind of a follow-up clarification to the previous one about monitoring. And the question was, will you get the reports, but who does the actual physical testing of the water? I don't know if you can speak to that at all, Clara.
Yeah. Yeah, the facility is required to do the actual testing themselves. We do typically once in a permit cycle do our own sampling to do a comparison side by side testing, but when an inspection is completed, a high level inspection, we evaluate their sampling and testing protocols. So we're reviewing all of the analytical methods and ensuring that the samples are collected properly.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add that they also have their sampling and analysis plan through the permit. That also is approval of how they're collected and analyzed.
All right, thank you both. I'm going to do one more question in the Q&A box, and then we'll go to raise hands. Looks like we have a couple. The next question, there are wetlands directly to the north and east of the Timber Shores site, very close by, hundreds of feet, as well as to the southwest, a little further away. So it's surrounded by the wetlands that Eagle strives to protect. What is Eagle doing to protect the wetlands? I don't know if you can talk about this at all in the context of the permit and surface water.
Sure, I can talk about it. I would just say that, currently I was not aware of any wetlands within 1,000 feet of the discharge. We can certainly take another look, and if anyone has, information they'd like to submit to us through the comment process, that's always certainly helpful. But right now, the groundwater discharge permit is protective of drinking water quality. Our rules do take into consideration surface water quality, and there are limitations such as a phosphorus limit or a total inorganic nitrogen limit that are in place that also are protective of surface water. But in terms of the wetlands specifically, we can certainly take another look at that.
Thanks, Alyssa. All right, we're going to go to the raised hands. Jeff Zokas. Jeff, it looks like you have your hand raised. We will unmute you and then allow you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Looks like you're unmuted on our end. Are you there, Jeff? You'll just there you are.
I have a question in regards to the MBBR system. The research that I've done on that system suggests that it's a very highly sophisticated system that performs at an optimum rate when it has a steady flow day in and day out throughout the year. I think you all know that this park is going to basically be a 3-month operation. And so I have obviously grave concerns about a system that likes a steady flow. What are you going to do for the rest of the year when there's relatively nobody there? And in regards to that concern, I just recently learned about the village of Northport has an MBBR system, but that's a central system for the village. And the village, just like the Timber Shores RV park, has a changing population from summer to winter. And as a result of that, the system slowly slows down, and throughout the late fall, winter, and spring, the fire department has to pump water into the system to keep it operating at an efficient level. So that, to me, you've got a village with a full-time operation and maintenance staff that can keep that system operating efficiently versus a Timber Shores small-time operation. What are they going to do to try and keep that system from not failing because it's only really operating for 3 months of the year? So that's my question.
Thanks for the question, Jeff. Any thoughts?
Yep, so I can't speak to specifics right now. That would be something that'd be included in the facilities operation and maintenance manual, which we don't typically require until the system's at least in construction, so we know it's going to be constructed. Typically, there's a variety of things that facilities can do with MBBRs, excuse me, to keep them working. Some of them will shut them down for the winter and then start them up prior to the need for the treatment to get the bugs going. In terms of like just sticking water in it, that's not necessarily going to help the system. You need that organic matter to get that bacteria going. It needs something to eat, in simple terms. So there's a variety of things that they can do. What they are going to do, I don't have specifics to tell you now. Again, that's something that we're going to be looking at ultimately when they're looking at meeting permit limits, because if they're not meeting permit limits, then we know that there's something wrong. So I guess it should be written down what their plan is going to be. And then we're going to be ensuring that they're properly operating that system through ensuring that those effluent limitations are met.
I'll just add one thing to that as well, that the facility would be required to have a properly certified operator that is overseeing the system and the operations.
All right. Thank you both. We have a couple minutes left in our Q&A session. Thanks for your question, Jeff. Paul, Walter, we're going to unmute you for your question. You had your hand raised there. And Paul, you can ask your question when you're ready.
Thank you. Listening to the various questions and answers that have been presented so far, not aware of any wetlands within 1,000 feet. Site inspections begin after the situation is permitted. All of this seems to be very weighted in favor of the applicant rather than the circumstances. And it seems that Eagle is taking all of the applicant's information and not really focusing on their own due diligence. I believe somebody said that there hasn't even been a site visit for the particular location and the application plan. So how does that reconcile with Eagle's primary objective of taking care of the environment in these locations? If you take simply the applicant at their word and you don't get the contextual aspect of seeing the site personally, it seems like that would be a very difficult challenge to meet.
Thanks for your question, Paul. Any thoughts?
I'll jump in just a little bit. We are a groundwater discharge permit. So what we're looking at is, we have to wait till after the system is constructed and we assure that we meet the limitations that the facility can then design and install a treatment system that is protective of the environment. And, we may not make site visits to each and every site, but we do on some occasions. But in this occasion, we also use the aerial imaging to look at the area. As for the nearby wetlands, actually, I was actually aware of those. It's just, we also require a hydrogeological investigation to be submitted with each application. And we also look at which way the groundwater is flowing. I believe, we have Angela Strong on here as the geologist, but, we have extensive amount of information that is submitted to us. We have a multi-page document of, like I said, the hydrogeological investigation that looks at what's under the ground and where the groundwater is going. So just because there may be nearby wetlands, it may not, the discharge in that location may never make it to that aspect. project. So what we're also looking at is, looking at our limitations that are set in the groundwater. I think I've seen some additional questions on here. I'll take this opportunity to answer some of those. We're looking at setting our limitations in the groundwater at half of what drinking water limitations would be. So we assure that we have a definite protection for drinking water if they're meeting their limitations inside of their property line within half of the drinking water limitation. So Paul, I do understand your concern if we've never been on site, but I just wanted to let you know that it does not mean that we haven't looked very technically at this location. And it's great that we have all these aerial imageries and the data that has been presented to us on the geological formation and where the groundwater is going in this area.
I appreciate what you're saying. I must say I'm still extremely concerned. You just made the statement about you're really waiting until the system is installed, which sort of again loads the circumstances to the applicant rather than the surrounding community and their concerns. It sounds a lot like, well, nothing's being done. The applicant comes in, we take them at their word, we issue the permit, and then we go out and we sort of worry about what things are going on. You talked about inside the property line. There's a certified trout stream that runs inside the property line and then comes out and discharges into the lake itself. And it is directly downhill from the proposed site. So I don't know if that's showing up in the overhead views, the satellite pictures, or however it is that we're evaluating this. But I think that in circumstances like this, it seriously suggests that considering the implications, it might be more important to err on the side of caution when issuing these permits rather than issuing the permits based on the applicant's data and then hoping they hold up their end of the equation by discharging only what they're supposed to be discharging in the manner that they're supposed to be discharging it and not creating any violations or environmental, let's call it disasters. Because really, once that happens, it's a bit too late, and sending letters and potentially eventually escalating it to more formal action with enforcement, penalties, and fines, it really doesn't do anything for the environment, and it really doesn't do anything for the existing residents and the existing circumstances of the site. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thanks for your those thoughts, Paul. And you're more than welcome to share those during the hearing session, which we're going to be doing here shortly. We're actually at time, but we need to move on to the next part of the evening. Thank you all for all of those questions, and our panel for all the great answers. And we'll move on to the hearing part. Before I do, though, just want to make sure you're aware there are other ways to submit an official comment in case you didn't want to make a comment tonight. In a couple minutes here, we'll go through how we're going to do these comments. You can submit it through MyEnviro. You can put them directly to MyEnviro at that link below, which we'll put in the chat. Alyssa did a good job of talking about and explaining how to enter that in this presentation. Or by mail, you can submit comments to Alyssa at Alyssa Inachko, Water Resources Division, Eagle, P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan, 48909, 7958. The comment period is open until November 17th, 2023. So in case you didn't want to make a comment tonight, or if you have anything to add, you'll have that opportunity. And I should also mention, if we didn't get to your question, we got to a lot of them, but I'm going to be providing Alyssa's contact information a little bit later on, so you can follow up with Alyssa if we weren't able to get to your question or answer your question fully. So you'll have that opportunity if you hang in there till the end. All right. So now we're going to move forward with the hearing part. This is where you're going to have an opportunity to make a statement and a comment for the record. on this application. I'm going to talk about, read the opening statement to start, which will include the procedures for this hearing and how the comment process will work. And I have this opening statement that I need to read. The public hearing will be used to take comments on the proposed groundwater discharge permit for the discharge of treated sanitary sewage to the ground at Timber Shores Family RV Camping and Beach Resort. This discharge is proposed at a maximum of 38,688 gallons per day to be located at 7810 Northwest Bay Shore Drive in Leelanau Township. As far as how we're going to, the comment process is going to work. Those of you who pre-registered to attend today's hearing and indicated that you'd like to make a comment, we're going to start with you. We'll first call your name, unmute your microphone so you can make your comment. We will then call your name in order which you registered. Once you have called the names of everyone who indicated they wanted to make a comment during registration, we will open it up to comment to all other attendees, and we'll explain how we're going to do that. At that time, if you have not made a comment and wish to do so, you can click the raise hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. If you're on the phone, please hit #2 on your phone to raise your hand. We will call on those who have their hand raised to make a comment in the general order in which their hand was raised. Each person will have 5 minutes to make their comment. I'll indicate when you have 1 minute left and when your time is expired. If I indicate your time is expired, please wrap up your comments immediately so that we can allow the next person to make their comment. Please be sure to state your name and any organization you represent to start your comment. If you'd like to make a comment but do not wish to make a verbal comment today, you are welcome to submit a written comment to the department. Written comments may be submitted online using our MyEnviro database. Link was provided in the chat, and it was talked about earlier. Comments can also be submitted to Water Resources Division, Eagle P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909 7958. This hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be part of the information the department will consider in the proposed groundwater discharge general permit. Comments received will not be responded to at this time, but will be included in the response to the public comment documents and be part of the permanent record. All comments and information received will be available in MyEnviro on our online database. The public comment period is open until November 17th. All right. To recap, some of those instructions. So we have a list of 5 people who indicated during registration that they wanted to make a comment. So we're going to list your name. Then we're going to unmute you. You can unmute yourself, make your comment, and then we'll go on to the next person. And I'll also let you know who's next in line. Once we get through those 5 people, then anyone else who has not made a comment yet will just have to raise their hand in Zoom using the raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on the phone, again, select #2. That will raise your hand, and then we'll call on you in turn to make your comment. As we mentioned, everyone will have 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute heads up when you're getting close to that time. That makes it fair for everybody, and it'll be 1 comment per person. I should also mention everybody here tonight who wants to make a comment will have that opportunity. So we're going to go through and take everybody's comments until we're done with everyone's comments. And then also, when you're called upon, and if there's an affiliate organization you're affiliated with, please also identify that. So with that, the first person on my list is Tom Ohnke. So Tom, we're going to find you in the audience here and unmute you, and then you'll be able to unmute yourself and begin. All right, you there, Tom?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep, sounds good. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. I am an attorney. I represent a majority of the 63 property owners who are downstream and who rely on drinking well water near Timber Shores. You may know that that land has been deemed with the township to be environmentally sensitive under their zoning ordinance. The Michigan Public Health Code is the thing that should, the law that should drive us here. The health code says that a government sewer connection, when available, must be something that is accessed by Timber Shores in this case. The state of Michigan campground permits say the same thing. If a government sewer system is available, then it has to be connected to. We also have a Michigan Supreme Court case that defines what it means to be available. Available doesn't mean within 200 feet. Available doesn't mean nearby. Available means with the proper engineering work, proper studies, and enough money, then Timber Shores can connect to the Delta sewer system. Now, one of our participants on the staff here, we deem property close by if it's within 200 feet. Well, it says that. In fact, this connection point for Timber Shores is available within 1.9 miles, running directly north down M22 through the Department of Transportation right of way. Secondly, there is an even closer connection if you go a half a mile to the north near Indian Beach Road. So 200 feet is not going to cut it when you're dealing with municipal sewers. Municipal sewers, and in this case here in Delta, run for miles, tens of miles. So 200 feet is nothing when it comes to a sewer. Now, I'm also a bit disappointed, if you'll forgive me for being disappointed, that some of the written submissions that we have made from our office and others have made have not been read. One of our participants here today said, well, within 1,000 feet of the two rapid infiltration basins is Ennis Creek. And Ennis Creek runs, and we sent you a topographical map. Maybe you didn't see it, maybe it wasn't clear enough, but it shows that from the rapid infiltration basins, the sewage, once it enters the porous soil, sandy loamy soil, will flow northeast, and it's going to hit Ennis Creek, and it's going to wash from Ennis Creek into Grand Traverse Bay. This is why you should come and make a site visit. This is a very unique parcel of land, and I'll leave it to others to talk about the high and the downhill flow, and speak to the fire and say applicant can prove that a connection to the null sewer is not available. I don't think they can prove that. As a matter of fact, I know the consultant on behalf of Timber Shores issued a 2020 study, which I referenced to you in one of my correspondences. And that study said, quote, for mainly economic reasons, Timber Shore decided that it would construct its own facility. For mainly economic reasons. And do you know what the economic savings was to Timber Shores? Had you read my letter, maybe you did, you would find it says $274,000 in today's money. That's all that they would save if they had to run that sewer pipe down M22 or if they had to connect over at Indian Beach Road. Now, what will happen when that wastewater treatment gets to Northport? Northport has a secondary treatment system right now. I believe the Timber Shores can afford to pay for a tertiary treatment system, send all of its wastewater to the NELTA system, and we'll end up after a tertiary treatment with cleaner water that goes into the bay than we probably even pump out of our wells. So you need to consider, if you will, the information that has been submitted by our office as well as the many neighbors who have bothered to research this, and not simply take at face value what the applicant
Yeah, 1
says.
minute, Tom.
Because thank you. Because the applicant is going to do what's in their most economically beneficial interest. That's what the applicant is going to do. Now, we've got 5 staffers here on this Zoom meeting tonight. I suggest that one or two make an appointment. We'll get sets of people up who can walk you through the property, and you will find a very unique parcel of property in Traverse Bay. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Tom. All right. Next on our list is Michael Komos, but it doesn't look like we have a Michael on the audience. Michael, if you're calling in by another line, please raise your hand in Zoom and we'll call on you. If you're on the phone and calling in instead, select #2 to raise your hand. And if you're not on the line, we'll move on to the next person. All right. So after Michael is Jeff Zokas, and then after Jeff is Dennis Turner. All right, so Jeff, we're going to find you in the audience here and unmute you. Craig. Jeff was on here. Craig, it looks like we have Craig Zokas unmuted. Are you on another account, Jeff? Okay, if you're not on, Jeff, we'll move on to the next person. If you are on, raise your hand in Zoom. And then after Jeff is Dennis Turner. So Dennis, we're going to find you in the audience. All right, looks like we don't have Dennis on the line. Paul Walter. Oh, looks like Dennis is here. All right. So Dennis, you're unmuted on our end. You can begin when you're ready.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. So first I want to thank you for holding this meeting. I think it's important for you to get a sense of the community with respect to this proposal. And there's really no better gauge to assess how the folks of Leelanau County feel about this proposal than the referendum that was held on the Timber Shores project last November, when the voters of the township overwhelmingly voted against the Timber Shores plan. Now, a large part of that opposition to the proposal was concerned about the private wastewater disposal system it was proposing. So that was a big factor in the opposition. Another reason for Eagle to be hesitant about approving the application is that I think the proper presumption, and I think the state law says the same thing that has been mentioned before, is that the presumption is that before a privately owned and operated disposal system is approved, the applicant should demonstrate the impossibility of connecting to a municipal sewage system. That in this case, there is a relatively nearby municipal sewage system that could be used. And it's not enough for the applicant to claim that the municipal system is impossible. The applicant must demonstrate the impossibility by clear and convincing evidence. Therefore, before Eagle makes any decision regarding the application, it should insist that a feasibility study be conducted at the applicant's expense to determine the feasibility of connecting to the Northport wastewater system. As we might say, this is a question of fact. Is it feasible is a question of fact. And so there has to be, and the burden is on the applicant to prove the facts that suggest that it's impossible. And I think that's what Eagle should require of the applicant. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Dennis. All right, next up, and the last person on my list who indicated during registration they want to make a comment was Paul Walter. So Paul, we're going to unmute you, and you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Tom and Dennis, for your comments as well. I live on Bayview Avenue in Northport, beautiful county of Leelanau, along the Northport Bay shoreline in Grand Traverse Bay. On any given day, we share this shoreline with wildlife, including many species of fish, ducks, heron, bald eagles, kingfishers, songbirds. All around us are these fragile wetlands, these streams teeming with Michigan native plants, shrubs, and trees. We all rely on this clean, essential water, a functioning ecosystem, and a healthy habitat to call home. This probably informs my prior questions and comments. I live just literally downstream of the situation that was being discussed here. Timber Shores proposes to create an on-site wastewater treatment plant less than half a mile away. They propose to dump millions of gallons of treated sewage wastewater into nearby sandy loamy soil basins, highly absorbent. Our well is among the 63 residential wells just downhill and east of the proposed sewage pits previously mentioned. The elevation here drops 70 feet from the M22 border of this property to the Grand Traverse Bay shoreline. The risk of contamination of the surrounding well waters, the bay itself, including nearby Indian treaty protected whitefish spawning grounds, all of these are of substantial concern and should be to Eagle as well. Michigan rules and the Leelanau Township zoning ordinance both require Timber Shores to connect to the NLTUA sewer system, quote, if available, which we have determined that it is. Last November, 60% of the Leelanau Township voters voted yes in favor of upholding ordinance number 1. Timber Shores now seek a get around from the state through Eagle to ignore the voters' rights. We ask that the Eagle deny this permit request and put our laws to work to protect our well water, the pristine waters of Grand Traverse Bay that we enjoy as residents and that are being enjoyed by the public at large. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you hearing me on multiple occasions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. All right, looks like we have Michael Komos on the line now. So Michael, we're gonna unmute you on our end. You can unmute yourself and begin if you want to make a comment. Did you want to make a comment, Michael? All right, if you do, you can select the mute icon or the microphone icon to unmute yourself. All right, and then we will, okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I took a second there. Thank you for this opportunity, and I have nothing new to add that wasn't already stated by many of my neighbors. I do believe that the connection to the Northport sewer system is obligated here and necessary to from a legal viewpoint and an environmental one. And so I join with the others who have spoken about it, and thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. All right, that gets through everybody on my list. So if there's anybody who hasn't made a comment yet and you would like to make a comment tonight, you can raise your hand in Zoom using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If you're on the phone, you can select #2 on your receiver and that will raise your hand in Zoom and we'll call on you using your last 4 digits of your number. So looks like we have a couple raised hands. Karen Gross, you unmuted on our end. You can unmute yourself and begin when you're ready.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. My last name is Gross. Hang on, of course. One thing I would like to say is I'm wondering about the tribal input on this issue. And I even visited the tribe today and I talked to a couple people, which is not definitive, of course, but it was at the government center at Peshabaton. There is tribal treaty fisheries here. And the couple people that I spoke to, the Anishinaabe tribal areas, they were unaware of this. And I think they need to weigh in. I also think that if no one has come up here and looked at this property, it really truly is a very sensitive area. And I live within 2 miles of this proposed thing. I am very concerned about the implications of what this could do to our environmental area. And I am wondering why the attorney, what the criteria is for, involving the Attorney General, which was mentioned at the beginning of this, and feel that, it ought to be taken to that level. So thank you very much for all this information, and I appreciate my opportunity to make this comment.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. All right, next up is Julie Fitz. Julie, we are going to unmute you, and you can unmute yourself and begin when you're ready.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I was just wondering what happens if the nearby homeowners' wells are contaminated? Who is responsible for that? Because these are millions and millions of gallons of human waste, that treated human waste that's going into this sandy soil. And our property is less than a mile away from this, as are many other homes and property owners. And in the event that it is contaminated, where do we go from there when we can't use our properties and can't drink the water anymore?
Thanks, Julie. We're just taking comments right now. What I can do is provide you with Alyssa's phone number, and she might be able to help answer your question after this hearing.
Okay, and I just wanted to add that somebody had said that you're assuming truthfulness for monitoring the amount of gallons and the maintenance of the system. So you're hiring one person to maintain the system, and then we all are assuming that that is going to be monitored properly. And if it's not, the ramifications are extreme for the environment and for the neighboring property owners. So I just wanted to make those comments, and I hope that somebody can follow up on what we should do as homeowners if we detect, if this permit is approved and we detect that our wells are all contaminated. Who should we contact and who is responsible for that? Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. All right, next up, Mary Tonnenberger. You are unmuted. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I appreciate the opportunity to make remarks here tonight. A little bit of background. I live on Omena Bay, just south of the property, and we've lived here 30 years. I've been involved in this whole property in one way or another for over 30 years. I was on the Leelanau Township Planning Commission when we heard the first application for Timber Shores, and then on the Township Board. I served on the Leelanau County Board of Commissioners for 8 years and on the Leelanau-Benzie Board of Health. We have been investigating groundwater and septic regulations, and I have seen progress in the last 20 years. In fact, in the last 2 years, finally in our county, we've had some improvement in recognizing the importance of groundwater. And I've also, because of situations on Omena Bay, seen the strengthening of the Eagle monitoring of what is happening relative to our bays. And I applaud you for having this public hearing. And I would submit that your staff here on the screen will be very responsive to what we in Leelanau Township and the county are recognizing as groundwater purity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. All right, next up, Bridget Hart. You are unmuted on our end. You can begin when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a comment about the evaluation of the feasibility and alternatives to discharge to groundwater. In Rule 2219, Section 2, it says, at a minimum, alternatives to the discharge that shall be considered are minimizing the volume of toxicity of the wastewater, recycling wastewater, connecting to a municipal sanitary sewer system. So, and then it goes on, but it sounds like from that rule that it's on your end to address the feasibility of connecting to the sewer system, not the person who's applying for the permit. At least that's how I read it. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Bridget. All right, next up, Ronald Malik. Ronald, you're unmuted. You can unmute yourself and begin when you're ready to make your comment.
Yes, it's actually Elizabeth Malik. We're here together, so forgive me. I'm north of the township and just want to say that north of the project. Just want to say that I too think that a feasibility study for hooking up to the municipal sewer is in order. I'll let you all figure out who's on first as far as who pays for it. I thought it was the developer, but I think it needs to be done. It does not sound like Eagle so far has been to the site, has done some of the due diligence that I would have expected. So I hope that you'll be able to arrange that. I also want to say that it does not make sense that you would have a project, the largest one in the state of Michigan, over $15 million for 500 people, and you're now talking about having a secondary one, same size, basically for another 500 people or 355 RVs, plus their daily allotment, within a couple of miles. So we're going to end up with, in our paradise up here, with all these spotted wastewater treatment plants, because anytime anybody has a 500 or 300 development, they're going to want to have their own wastewater treatment plant. And I don't really think that's what the township wants. Certainly the residents, I am sure, do not. And I don't believe Eagle does either. So I'm hoping that you will take our comments to heart. We've been here almost 50 years and have seen a lot of changes, but this is a very, very delicate property. And there are a lot of concerns with the groundwater discharge, the amount of discharge, the detriment to our shoreline. There is just a lot of circumstances here that I think warrant further investigation before any permit is granted. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you for your comment. All right. Is there anybody else on the line who has not made a comment yet that would like to make a comment? You can just raise your hand in Zoom by selecting the raise hand icon, or if you're on the phone, select #2. Looks like we have a couple people. Robert Vershev. My apologies if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. You are unmuted and you can begin when you're ready.
Thanks. It's Robert Vershev. I'm with Gosling Zubak Engineering. We're the engineer that's prepared the application that you're reviewing. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time for the public hearing. We are listening. We understand the concerns. There's a few things that I just wanted to point out as while we're all here tonight. I guess the first thing is, like, early on, we did look at the connecting to the NREPA system, and it technically it was deemed to be feasible by our office. The costs were close enough that the developer was favoring going to NREPA, even though it was slightly more than our initial estimates for the on-site system. The problem was apparent when NREPA ultimately does not have capacity to take the flow that Timber Shores would generate. So while it's feasible, it isn't available. I mean, if the municipal system can't accept the amount of flow, then how can that be available? So there's, this has been a lengthy process, and it's been looked at many ways. There's even been litigation that's settled by the court in favor of Timber Shores that, past agreements did not compel Timber Shores to hook up to the NREPA system. There's also been court decisions that held that a township can't require an applicant to build offsite improvements such as expansion of the NREPA plant. So, I mean, if there's not available capacity at the plant, but we need to they want us to study adding capacity. We're basically building a plant, which is what we're proposing to do on the Timber Shores property. So we've followed all the Eagle regulations, the state law. We've done the studies, hydrogeological studies. It's been something that's been looked at extensively. Couple other things, just to kind of put it in perspective for all the neighbors. The wastewater treatment plant we're anticipating the effluent that leaves the plant would be have a BOD, which is one of the, there's several technical things that Eagle reviews, parameters, and it sets limits on in the permit. The BOD, we'd expect to have a 25 milligram per liter limit, nitrogen of 5 milligrams per liter, and phosphorus of 1 milligram per liter. Put that in perspective with a typical residential system. You'd expect BOD leaving your septic tank at 150 to 250 milligrams per liter, nitrogen of 20 to 35 milligrams per liter, and phosphorus of 10 milligrams per liter. So it's essentially wastewater leaving your typical residential system is 10 times strong as what the treated effluent coming out of this wastewater plant would be. I looked at just the neighboring area.
You got about a minute left, Robert.
Thank you. I counted approximately 75 residential homes from Cove all the way up to up the shoreline. These are homes right on the water. If each of those averages just over 3 bedrooms, that's 350 gallons per day from each home, and over 75 homes, that's over 26,000 gallons per day of untreated septic tank waste entering the ground. And that's closer to the water that everybody is trying to protect. And that's what we're trying to do too. So again, I just want to thank Eagle for their review and efforts, and the neighbors for their concerns. We do listen to them. We welcome the issuance of a permit with defined limits that we can design the plant to meet and protect the environment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Robert. All right, Jane Robinson, we're going to unmute you. You're next. And you can unmute yourself and begin when you're ready.
Hi, yes, thank you. My husband's here with me, Wayne Anderson, and he has a statement to make.
Hi, the applicant seems to be accounting for 75 gallons per site per day to equal their 38,000 gallon waste. They're not accounting for the fact that most people will come up with their trailers full, their tanks full, and dump discharge from the new arrivals can be up to 18,000 gallons based on what comes in on a normal RV, say a 50-gallon tank. They're not accounting for that. They're also not accounting for the fact that they could end up being a pumping station, because that's a source of revenue for RV parks, where people just driving by could empty their discharge also. And that's not being accounted for. Other things that are not being accounted for are the fact that they're going to develop the property. They're going to have putt-putt, they're going to have a store, they're going to have different attractions and things that are not being accounted for, as well as the fact that they're going to have a pond, and I don't really know if I'd want to be in that pond. It seems like the applicant is building in the 38,000 K a day for 6 months, which would total 7.1 million gallons. But the problem is the 7.1 million gallons, or the 38K per day, would be greater than the rate of absorption that the environment could take. It's not so much as the last commenter was saying, the quality of the water that goes in and likening it to houses. Instead, it's more or less along the lines of the amount of water that's going in and being processed. So the 7.1 million gallons, which is the absolute limit per year, is basically 6 months of usage for this. And should they be planning on doing that 7.1 million gallons, it will be over 6 months or 3 months instead of a year. And for that, in turn, they'll be paying a fine, which will still probably be less than it would cost them to hook up with a sewage system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. All right, are there any comments from anyone who has not made a comment yet? Again, raise your hand in Zoom, please. All right. And looks like Tom Omke has his hand raised. Tom, do you have somebody else on the line who would like to make a comment?
No, I don't. I'd like to respond to.
No, Tom, we're doing one comment per person. So you've already had your opportunity. So what you can do is I'm going to provide the other ways to make a comment here in a second. And so you'll be able to submit supplemental comments either through My Waters or the mailing address. But thank you.
Thank you. I only wanted to respond to Gosling Zubek's comments, which were incorrect.
All right. Thank you. All right. Is there anybody else who has not made a comment yet who would like to make a comment? Again, if you're on the phone, you can select #2 to raise your hand in Zoom. Or if you're on the phone, raise your hand using the raise hand icon. If we don't have any more comments, what we'll do is we'll go through those other ways to make a comment, like I just mentioned, and we'll list Alyssa's information again so that you can have it if you have any follow-up questions. So I'm still not seeing any other raised hands, so we're going to go ahead and close out the hearing tonight, and I just have a closing statement that I'll read. As a reminder, the public comment period for accepting written comments is open until November 17th, 2023. The department will consider all comments received. Written comments may be submitted online using Eagle's MyEnviro database. A link is provided in the chat directly in the comment submittal form. Comments can also be submitted to Alyssa Ianachko at the following address: Water Resources Division, Eagle, P.O. Box 30453, Lansing, Michigan 48909 7958. And again, all that is showing on your screen for those who are logging in by computer. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate the interest and the time it took you to be here today. The public hearing is now closed. Thank you again. All right. If you have further questions, or if we didn't get to your question during the Q&A session, thank you for all who submitted those, by the way, again, some great questions. And thanks to our panel for answering those. You can contact Alyssa, engineer permit writer. Phone number is 517-899-9974 for those on the phone. And that's Alyssa Ianachko, engineer permit writer. Phone number 517-899-9974, or by email at yanOCHKOA1@michigan.gov. That's MICHIGAN.gov. And again, that's yanOCHKOA1@michigan.gov. All right. And with that, any closing comments for us tonight, Christine?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Eagle would like to thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to share these thoughts with us. All of the comments that we received and any additional information will be considered as we move forward in evaluating this. So thank you again for taking time to share your comments and concerns.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Last thing I'll leave you with is just a reminder that this hearing was recorded. It'll be on Eagle's YouTube channel here in a couple days, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thanks again.